In March of 2007, when I was 3 years old, Coalition Victory was banned in Commander. Yeah, I bet that made you feel old, huh? Anyway, Coalition Victory was banned because it created an unfun play experience when it was cast, which makes sense on paper. If the spell resolves and all its conditions are met, the game just ends. But because Commander has sped up significantly in the last few years, a ton of people argue that Coalition Victory should be unbanned for Commander play. There was an entire podcast episode from the Command Zone about evaluating all banned cards, and it was almost an afterthought that Coalition Victory should be unbanned. But I, your friendly neighborhood contrarian, disagree. I think Coalition Victory should remain banned in Commander, and here's why. First, I want to start off by clarifying that if Coalition Victory ends up unbanned, I really don't care. Like you'll see later in this video, I don't think this ban would make huge waves, but to me, it's a matter of principle. I just don't want to make the impression that I'm willing to die on this hill, because it's really not a big deal. This is a card game. I just see people writing off Coalition Victory as an easy unban, when I personally think that there's a bit more to the story. If you think Coalition Victory deserves an unban, and you have your own personal reasons, that's totally fine as well. And if it ever does see an unban, I'm not going to be up in arms about it like I might be with some other cards. So what are some of the reasons to unban Coalition Victory? For one, the card itself really sucks. It's dookie. It's turbo ass, if you will. It costs 8 mana, you can only play it in 5-color decks, it requires at least 3 other cards on your battlefield to make work, and worst of all, it's a sorcery. And in an era where cards getting banned are cards like Dockside Extortionist and Nadu, cards banned because they're obscenely overpowered and probably should have never been printed in the first place, Coalition Victory stands out as something that's really not that powerful amongst a list of format warping cards. It's also not particularly hard to stop. The spell checks for its conditions on resolution, so killing a creature to remove one of the 5 colors would fizzle the spell and the game would continue. I'll touch on this more, but I actually think this works against the spell's case for unbanning it. Coalition Victory can also put an end to an otherwise grindy game with no end in sight. I personally had one of these games around a week ago. I was testing out my new Aminatu Miracles deck against a pod of Arkelos Land Toolbox, Clevelenyo Vampires, and a Karlov Life Gain deck. Through around an hour into the game, I was in a really good spot to win after killing the Karlov player, until my opponent cast Villainous Wealth on me for 11 and hit a farewell. After crying in the bathroom for a half hour, I returned to the game and it ended up lasting around 3 hours. And do you want to know how we ended the game? We all agreed to just draw it out because it was getting late and we were all essentially holding guns up to one another without being able to actually kill anyone. The Clevelenyo player literally had Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond both on the field, but couldn't do anything to either of us to start the infinite combo without us both being able to stop it. That is a game that could end with Coalition Victory, and I'd be totally cool with it. So now, let's look at the flip side. You're in the heat of a Commander game. Everyone's gotten developed, and it's time for people to start playing their haymakers. Player A is starting to amass a board of creatures, and is a turn or two away from killing multiple players with an overrun effect. Player B just tapped out to cast a giant dragon. Player C is ramping to cash in on a giant X spell, and Player D, having only their commander and some mana rocks on board, decides to end the game out of nowhere by casting Coalition Victory. Now, assuming this is a pot of players whose decks don't typically have game-ending combos, this can be pretty underwhelming, and I'd be willing to bet that you could recall way more Commander games where everything is just starting to heat up, as opposed to a game that's been dragged out to everyone's insanity. I know I do. Now, in my opinion, this end to a game is pretty lame, especially if there's an expectation among the playgroup to not play game-ending combos. Not necessarily verbally, but through months or even years of games together, where it's generally not the case. This all goes back to the initial reason the card was banned. It's not fun. Now, I am well aware that Rule 0 exists. Playgroups should be using it to police the format themselves. But there's a much more nuanced conversation to be had about Rule 0 in general. I personally think that Rule 0 doesn't really work. What evidence do I have to support that? Well, not only does every single channel that makes videos about Commander have some sort of video giving tips on how to enforce it, indicating people often ask about it, but the bannings from the end of last year showed that the Commander Rules Committee didn't trust Commander playgroups to enforce it either. It was supposed to be the thing policing cards like Dockside, but in the end, it couldn't. Whatever reason that may be is far beyond the scope of this video though. In short, I just don't think the Rule 0 argument is as strong anymore since it seems like it doesn't really work out. Now let's go back to talking about Coalition Victory. Another aspect of Coalition Victory is the surprise factor. See, Coalition Victory is likely only able to work once. As soon as you cast it and end the game with it, every other game you play with the deck is grounds for other players to kill your commander as soon as possible out of fear of you ending the game. This then flips the script and creates an unfun play experience for the person with the Coalition Victory in their deck, despite the claim that its resolution is what isn't fun to play with. There was an article written on Card Kingdom about Coalition Victory getting unbanned, which I've linked in the description. It claims that all the other alternative win conditions are legal, which makes it fair to unban this one. The article specifically cited 4 cards that I'll talk about here: Approach of the Second Sun, Revel in Riches, Test of Endurance, and Tooth and Nail. When talking about the first 3, I think there's a serious false equivalence with that comparison. These 3 cards are alternate win conditions, but you can often see them coming from a mile away. Approach, you literally have to cast twice in a singleton format, and it's true you can use Narset's Reversal or Remand on it, but those are much more niche cases, and also likely require you to win the game over 2 turns. The other 2, in addition to plenty of other alternate win cons, require at least a full turn cycle to win the game, giving players plenty of time to dig for answers to the card itself, or have you failed to meet the condition to win the game. The window of opportunity to deal with Coalition Victory when you don't know about it ahead of time is just on the stack. And it's not like Coalition Victory is the only card that does this. Another combo that wins on the stack is anything involving Thassa's Oracle, but I think it's clear that Thassa's Oracle is not only significantly stronger than Coalition Victory, but even in a world where Rule 0 isn't very effective, it's much more likely to police cards like Thoracle rather than Coalition Victory. Going back to my last point, the way to stop Coalition Victory when you do know about it is just to hard focus whatever creature's fulfilling the condition on the card, which is most often going to be the commander. However, it's probably really rare for Coalition Victory to be the only win condition in the deck, which means your commander probably helps you do something else. See, it's one thing to hard focus a card that you know is a combo piece, but there's an extra layer of hurt when a card, and especially your commander at that, is almost accidentally a combo piece, and people always have to kill it on sight. Shooting down a card like Revel in Riches makes complete sense because that's the card that wins the game, but players being forced to kill your combo piece commander, who isn't intentionally a combo piece, can be a really nasty can of political worms to open for a lot of play groups. Tooth and Nail, though, is a much more interesting comparison. It's a card that can win the game on the spot, grabbing a 2-card combo like Mike and Trike. Where I think these cards are fundamentally different, though, is that Tooth and Nail can do other things other than end the game. I would feel the exact same way about Tooth and Nail as I do about Coalition Victory if Tooth and Nail read 7 green, the game is over. Coalition Victory's only purpose in a commander deck is to end the game right then and there. So at the end of all this, do I think Coalition Victory should stay banned? Yes. I think it's generally safer to keep a card that's super lame 99% of the time and almost unplayable banned, rather than letting it cause problems in any games it does see play in. Do I think it will stay banned? To be honest, I don't know. There's definitely reality where it is unbanned, and in that case, I wouldn't be surprised to see it have a huge surge in popularity and price, only for people to remember it's bad. The real kicker, though, is when WotC announces they're unbanning it right before spoiling it as a rare in the next premium set. Then its price can fall into true unplayable rare status where it belongs. Thank you for watching. Feel free to sound off with your thoughts on Coalition Victory in the comments. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing and check out some of my other videos about optimizing your commander decks. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next video.